You totally can plan a trip to Alaska. It's not overwhelming and it definitely is worth it. Next, we went to Girdwood. And at Girdwood, we stayed in a place in Alyeska. And from there, there were some very cool things to do. So, one was called the Winter Creek Trail, which was a very, very good trail. The Winter Creek Trail is just outside of the Alyeska Resort. It's a couple of miles. It takes about 2.5 hours or so to complete that trail. It's very, very scenic and it's fairly well traveled. And so you're not in the deep, deep, dark woods where you need to worry too much about bears. Um, but you're also fairly alone several times. So you do need to be aware of that. Travel in a group, always talk, always make noise. And we saw piles of bear poop. We didn't see any actual bears out on the trail, but it definitely could happen. The the Winter Creek Trail, there at the end of the trail, there is a hand tram that takes you across the Winter Creek, but it happened to not be in operation. It was getting replaced while we were there, so we missed out on that, but actually wasn't that big of a deal. It was very cool to see anyway. Another trail that you could do is called the Crow Pass Trail. That's a longer trail, but you could just do the first couple miles of that trail. The next thing that we did is the Alyeska Tram. This is definitely worth it. It does get a little bit expensive to go up the tram. It's maybe a 3 to 5 minute ride up the tram to the top of the mountain. And at the top of the mountain, at the Alyeska Resort, at the top of the mountain, there are restaurants and places that you can, view and just kind of walk around and look at the cool scenery. It was a great way to get up high quickly, up into the snow, and see a good panoramic view of everything around you. It definitely was worth it. What we did not realize is that the restaurants closed early when we were there, which was not advertised or posted. What was on their website was different than what was in reality. And so it helps to ask around and ask when those restaurants close, because that can change a little bit. So just be aware of that when you go up to the top of the tram. Next, we went to the Wildlife Center. So it's called the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center. It's a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to preserving Alaska's wildlife through conservation and education. I would go there early, go to this place at right when they open. I think it was 9 a.m. It's about a 1.5 mile loop. You park and you walk. You can drive it, but don't. Just get out and walk. It's kind of this gravel road about 1.5 miles long. It's a loop, and you see all sorts of different wildlife that's native to Alaska. These animals were either sick or injured and can't be re-released, but it's still very cool to see bison and fox, and there was brown bear, there was moose, there was elk, a lynx, caribou, muskox, reindeer, wolves. So it's very cool to see all those things in a very quick, scenic setting in the mountains on a nice morning. So get there right when they open, do that loop. Again, that's called the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center. Definitely worth it. Next, we went to the Portage Valley Recreational Area. It was very nice for a scenic area. It's good place for a picnic. We took the Portage Glacier cruise, and it's about an 80-foot boat, and it gets you out onto the lake closer to the glacier, and it gives you some great views of a glacier. It's not very rocky. It doesn't get you seasick. You don't need to worry about that at all. It's in a lake. It's very calm. It can get very cold though. The air temperature was maybe about 70 degrees, but out on the lake, and especially near the glacier, it felt a lot colder. It felt maybe in the 50s. The sun definitely helps out, but wear warm enough clothes when you're out on this boat so you can stay out on the upper deck and have a good view of everything. So the Portage Glacier cruise is definitely worth doing. We had our tickets printed and also the digital version through email, which was good because our digital version did not work when we were out there. So I had the printed copies, and that worked out just fine. At Portage Lake is the Begich Boggs Visitor Center. The Begich Boggs Visitor Center is a very cool, very artsy looking visitor center that's concrete and steel, which I love. It's very durable, and it looks like it's straight out of the video game No Man's Sky. It's very cool. It's at the entrance to a couple hiking trails, the Byron Glacier Trail and the Trail of Blue Ice. So those trails are very, very fun. They're easy. Some of the trail areas are boardwalk, so that was very easy and very nice to get you across some bridges, over some streams, and very panoramic mountain scenes. Very nice place to go for a walk. We thought about going to the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel, which is a tunnel that goes to Whittier. We decided to skip that. We thought it wasn't worth the time to wait, because it's a single lane tunnel. You have to wait your turn. You could end up waiting 30 minutes or an hour, and you need to pay about $13 per vehicle to get through this tunnel to go to Whittier. We decided to skip that. It wasn't worth the time or the expense. But that is an option if you like to go through really long tunnels. It's about a half-mile long tunnel through a mountain that gets to Whittier. But we decided to skip that. If you wanted to rent bikes, you can rent bikes at Girdwood. There's a bike rental place called the Powder Hound Ski Shop. And you can bike. It's called the Bird to Gird Bike Pathway. And it's about 12 miles one way, so 24 miles round trip along the Turngamm Arm. What we found is that a majority of time that bike path just parallels the highway. And so what you're seeing on the highway is really no different than what you were seeing on biking. So we decided not to go that route, but if you wanted to do that bike path, you could, and you could get down maybe a little bit closer to the coast. The biking is right alongside the highway again, and so you do get some highway noise, so it's not as nature-y as you would expect. So that is why we decided not to do the biking. Next, we traveled down to Seward, and at Seward, we had local hikes that we could do. One was called the Two Lake Trail Hike. It was very easy, very well marked, very straightforward to navigate. That was a fun hike. There was also the Skyline Jeep Trail, which is also called Mount Marathon Trail. That was fairly fun to do. It's very steep to get up initially, but it's a fun hike. And then there's also the Lowell Canyon Trail, which is about 1.5 miles kind of out and back near Seward. That was a fun one to do also right along a stream and rocky area. So those were kind of the hikes in Seward. Along Seward, you could walk along Resurrection Bay. There's this nice gravel and paved path that's about a mile or so along the waterfront park. That was fun to walk right along the coastal area all the way down to the Iditarod mile marker 0. At the end down in that area is the Sea Life Center. It's called the Alaska Sea Life Center. It's tons of educational marine life stuff that it's all indoors. It's very, very cool. It definitely was worth the time and the money to do that. When the weather wasn't that great, it was kind of a rainy, cloudy day, so we went to the Sea Life Center that day. Most of that was indoors, and it was super fun, and it was a good experience to see some sea lions up close. And also there's touch pools where you can put your hands in like sea anemones and sea urchins. The water is just icy cold, so it gives you a sense or a feeling as to how cold that water actually is. That water is pumped straight from the bay into these little touch pools. So it really makes you aware of how icy cold that water actually is. But that's very, very fun for kids to explore and run around and really see a lot of the marine life, and very, very educational. So that was fun and definitely worth it. At Seward, we did rent a boat and took a smaller boat out into the ocean. And that is where we saw a bunch of whales and sea lions and mountain goats on the shore. It for sure is worth doing one of these trips. The boat ride that we took is Seward Ocean Excursions. What we did is the Kenai, Fjords, and Resurrection Bay half-day tour, which was about 4.5 hour tour on a smaller boat. There were 5 of us plus the captain. So it was very personal and a very, very fun experience. It was nice to be out on the ocean and see all the ocean life. We saw pods of orcas, which was very, very cool. We saw whales and the nature out on the ocean, and just kind of the experience of talking with the captain over the nature and the wildlife. It was very cool. That for sure is worth the expense of doing. As far as seasickness goes, we do have some people in our family that do get seasick, and so we did not do the Dramamine route. We went to the Scopolamine, which is the little patches that go behind your ear. Before our trip, we got prescriptions from our doctor for those things, which was very easy to do. And about 3 of the 5 of us had those on. And we put those on that morning, several hours prior to our trip on the water. And that worked out very, very well. We had absolutely zero seasickness. And the boat was definitely thrashing around a few times. Some of the waves were quite big. The captain said that those waves are actually quite small comparatively, but to us who are used to Minnesota lakes, those waves were quite large. But we did not have any sort of seasickness at all. So if you have any issue with seasickness, definitely get those patches, bring them with you. Another hike in Seward is the Exit Glacier hike. This hike we would for sure recommend. It is a very, very nice. It's a fairly easy hike. It goes out to the Exit Glacier, and there's an overlook. There's different legs of the hike you can do depending on what skill level or how far you want to go. But it's a fairly popular hike. I would definitely do that Exit Glacier hike. It was one of our highlights of the entire trip. So don't skip out on that. There is an option to go further south to the Tonsina Creek Trail, which is out on Lowell Point. That was the area that was closed due to a landslide, and so we had to skip out on that. But again, there was plenty of other things to do, so we did not worry too much about that. On our trip back to Anchorage, we drove from Seward straight to Anchorage. If you wanted to stop along the way at the Bear Lake Trail, you could do that. When we came back to Anchorage, we wanted to spend an extra day at Anchorage, which worked out well because the airport was right there, and we could just get up that next morning and go to the airport and not worry too much about time constraints. In Anchorage, the main 2 things that we did was going to the Native Heritage Center, which was for sure worth it. It was nice to see kind of some of the Native Alaskan heritage. And then we also went to Kincaid Park. Kincaid Park has up to like 40 miles of hiking trails all throughout the woods, and then it can go down to the coast and the water. This is the area where we saw moose the most, and moose very close up. There are bear there, but there are plenty of people too. So it didn't feel scary at all going to Kincaid Park, but wildlife is definitely there, so be aware of that. You can also do another trail called Flat Top Mountain Trail, which is a 3.3 mile loop trail near Anchorage. It's open year round, but just be aware that portions of it can be closed off due to snow in early June. For navigating these trails, what I used for an app is the AllTrails app, which worked extremely well. I used the free version. I didn't pay for the pro version. The pro would be helpful, but you could definitely get by with just the free version. So the AllTrails app is what I used to navigate on all these trails. If that didn't work, I also had each trail printed out on paper on where exactly the trail was. And so I had a hard copy paper map with us, but I never used any of those at all. It was nice to know that I had them. I never needed them. It was nice to know that I did have those in case we needed them, but all of the trails are fairly well marked and very easy to navigate. And especially with the AllTrails app, that worked out really well. We pretty much had decent or functional, I'd say functional reception on most of these trails that we were on. So the AllTrails app is definitely worth getting. So as far as maps go, I had each map printed out off of Google Maps and directions. So I had from each place. So like, for instance, from the airport to get to Walmart, and then from Walmart to get to Potter Marsh, and then from Potter Marsh to get to the Turn Again Trail. I had each one of these legs mapped out on printed maps with step-by-step directions. I really had no idea what kind of reception we were going to have, and so I did not want to depend on that. It was also nice to just not have to get your phone out and wait for a signal and wait for things to load. It was nice to just have these maps printed out. I could look at them quickly and I had them very available. I'd have to say though, making all of these maps and printing them out, I just looked at them enough where I ended up just kind of knowing them. And so it was helpful to go to these places and just have in your mind what the map looked like already, where I didn't have to rely on a cell signal or Google Maps or even the printed version. I just had it in my head where I knew where these directions were. And that was just from making this binder. I didn't sit and study these maps or anything. Just from looking at it all the time, I just kind of knew where things were. So that was very helpful to save time and just made everything stress-free. If I knew, oh, there's a trail over there. If that one doesn't work out, I know that there's another trail right over here. We can go there. I just knew those things. So it was very, very helpful and very easy to do those things. It's definitely worth having that done. So these are all maps that I had printed out. So that is a summary of our Alaska preparation for our trip. And again, I brought this binder, with us, and we had it. We referenced it multiple times every day. It was super helpful to have all this information organized. It made our trip stress-free. It made it relatively easy, and it was just added to the enjoyable nature of the entire trip. It definitely is worthwhile having a trip pre-planned like this, but not so planned where you don't want to deviate from this plan. So hopefully this information helps you out. A lot of the research that I did, hopefully you won't need to do now. I hope you have a good time in Alaska, and I really, really think that you'll enjoy it. Alaska is one of the best trips that we've ever been on, and I definitely want to go back there and explore other areas. We did not go north to Denali or any of those other areas. We just saw a tiny, tiny, minuscule fraction of what Alaska has to offer, and still there was so much to do. It felt overwhelming. when I was first researching this, but when we were there and I had all those things in my mind and here planned, it felt very doable and very relaxing and very fun. So it was unlike any trip that we've ever been on before, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. So do the work beforehand, do the research beforehand, and you'll have a good time. Thanks.